So welcome to India and welcome to India and welcome to Manorama HORTUS. I look forward to having a good chat with you in front of this audience. Uh, Before we start, okay, how many of you are like sci-fi fans? Okay, how many of you are sci-fi readers? Okay, so we know that if we go here, there, everywhere, they will stand up and correct us.
Okay.
Right? So, no, it's sort of a little stressful when you're in front of such a knowledgeable audience. Anyway, so to get things started, so we're here to talk about this book called Dengue Boy by Michel. And it's not often that I find myself sort of lost for words, right? Because I like the sound of my own voice too much. But the words to describe this are, I don't know, people have called it savage, people have called it brutal, people have called it engaging, people have called it immersive, people have called it eye opening. It's all of this and more. And it basically starts with this boy. I promise to keep it spoiler free so that you can enjoy the book later. This boy who is not a boy in this way that we mean it, not in a human way. He's an insect, he's a mosquito born of a human mother. And what happens against the backdrop of climate crisis, of climate change? And we've heard the word, seen the word climate change and climate crisis thrown up so often. But the world of Dengue Boy, it's literally a climate ravaged by change. And of course, it's set in Argentina in 150 years from now. So, Michel, my first question to you is, it's like asking what came first, the dragon or the egg, right? So what came first, Dengue Boy or the themes, or did you work backwards? How did Dengue Boy come about?
Okay, thank you, Shenoy, for the introduction, and thank you for being here. It's a pleasure, and I'm grateful. It's my first time in Kochi and in India. I usually talk a lot of nonsense, but today I arrived yesterday at night, and for me it's 1 a.m. in the morning, so probably I will speak more nonsense than as often. I'm sorry for that, but I try to do my best. In a sort of way, both the theme and the story became together because I started to write this story during the COVID pandemic. Where at the same time in Argentina was happening a dengue pandemic. And this was quite new because dengue is like located, focused in spots where there is more like a tropical climate. But due to global warming, the disease expanded to all over the country. But since COVID was the sensation in media and all the journals were talking about that, like the politicians tried to hide that there was happening this pandemic. But a lot of people had the disease. So I wanted to portray this like invisible pandemic that was happening at the same time that COVID, but that was specific from the south of the world. But since it was happening in, let's say, like underdeveloped country, like big pharma or the big media didn't care about it because the territories and the population that were affected couldn't be monetized. So yes, and I got a friend of mine got the disease, and that's how the story started. Luckily, it wasn't like dangerous what happened to him. He only had fever, but after that, I'm a big fan of body horror and Kafka and Cronenberg. Yes. So after that, the story appeared, but it was connected in a sort of way with global warming of what was happening in Argentina. Yes, the story takes place in a future that due to global warming, the Antarctic ice sheet melt, and big part of South America gets flooded. And in this context, this creature appears that is half human and half mosquito, that is Dengue Boy. But also, when I started to do research, I saw that at the same time that there was like a climate like a climate crisis. Like there was also in fiction and in culture a crisis of imagining that, like a melancholy and nostalgia that okay, this is the end of the world, but also the end of the imagination. Well, at the same time, there were a lot of like capitalist corporations imagining how to terraform mate or other planets, or incluso terraform the Earth per se. So while like the critical approach to climate change didn't have like real responses, like capitalism was already thinking how to continue in this planet or other planets due to technology. So the book is also a satire about like how capitalism like monetize every catastrophe, even the one that puts humanity in danger as climate change is.
I mean, anything and everything is a means to profit for capitalism, right? And that's one of the reasons for climate change as well. And I'm glad you said the end of the world, right? But that's a question you topic you touch upon on this as well. So when we say the end of the world, I mean, I'm sure you've seen posters, environment conservation posters saying, there is no planet B, save the earth. There's no plan B, there's no planet B. It's the end of the world. But the question to ask is, it's the end of the world for who? It's the end of the world for who? It's the end of the world for people like you and me, while, these mega corporations and all these trillionaires and all are already making their plan C's and plan D's, which you speak about in the book, right? And how intertwined climate change is with capitalism and how everything, including sort of plagues and pandemics. I mean, there's actually a stock market index in the book that tracks viruses and that tracks pandemics, and that's how they make their money. So anything and everything can be monetized. So when you say it's the end of the world, it's the end of the world for us, but not for them, right? Isn't
Yes.
that what you say in the book?
Yes, totally. There was an experience I had during the COVID pandemic that I work in a university in New York, and I got stranded there when the pandemic started. That was, at least in the US, was the worst moment when New York had these new uncanny landscapes of Times Square empty and these really iconic parts of the city that nobody was there. And this imaginary of the end of the world became really like concrete. But at the same time, nobody was in the streets, but Wall Street continued functioning because as it works due to algorithmic trading, like the machines continue buying and selling stocks of the companies that were profiting the pandemic. So I had this big vision that, okay, when the world ends, these machines will continue operating. And the end of the world is not the end of capitalism, because they already have this plan B. That is like this utopia for billionaires, like exiting to other planets, to terraforming Mars. But I wanted to write a satire about that, but what would happen in the south of the world when the billionaires conquer other planets. Because also what is conflicting of these corporate plans of the billionaires, the 1% of humanity that want to exit and leave this as a disposable trash, is that this is inspiring science fiction stories. Like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all these guys read science fiction. So like the plans of the billionaires, like to transfer conscience to like a machine, to terraform other planets, they're inspiring science fiction. So the billionaires project, there was already a chapter of the history of the genre. And writing science fiction, you can't avoid that's part of the genre. So in my writing, I try to make a satire of that, and also think what would happen, yes, in the south of the world, like in Argentina, because what works as a utopia of these billionaires conquering Mars is that they don't say what would happen to the rest of humanity, as you were saying, and also to the rest of the planet. So the story is about that, like what would happen in the south, that in particular in South America, when the billionaires conquer Mars.
Yeah, I mean, while we'll get to the science fiction and what it aims to do a little bit later in the conversation, and to answer your question, what's going to happen to the south in the world of Dengibai, this place is underwater, it's gone. I think all of South India is gone, right? This venue doesn't exist, except in the game maybe. while the satire was sort of subtle and all that, what is not so subtle was the use of language. I just want to change track a bit about the book. It was very strong, right? In terms of the usage and in terms of the sort of body horror. I mean, all of you know what body horror is, right? Like, think Cronenberg, right? It's brutal, right? It's unfiltered. Was that an intentional choice? Was that an intentional choice? Because to me, it looked like it, because there's only so far, so much you can do with subtlety, right? Sometimes to get the point across, perhaps you need to like really put down all the filters and just really use harsh things, just put it out there to just sort of wake up people from their slumber. So was that an intentional choice? The choice of words, the choice of language?
Yes, totally. I like there is a sci-fi author called Darko Subin that he defines science fiction as cognitive estrangement, like taking the language of technology and science and try to say to think what that language is saying, but it cannot say per se, that it needs like fictional speculation to show what that's saying as a political stance. And he puts the example of Kafka's Metamorphosis, that that is the story about this bug that nobody knows if it is a cockroach or what type of creature it is. But in German, Kafka used a word that is das Ungeziefer. That is a word that's a technical name used in that time in the chemistry industry. Used it to frame the what were considered pests, like the vermins, the worms, the insects, the weeds, fungi that had to be exterminated, and that the chemistry industry started to produce massively these products. But what happened is when the Nazism started as a regime, they started to use this word in the Holocaust to kill humans. And they used the same product, the same chemical products that were used in Kafka time to kill insects. And Kafka had this vision of using this word to talk about a humanoid. So sci-fi, in a sort of way, like estranging scientific and technological language, allows to see something that is inside that language, but that like discipline can't show by itself. Science fiction can open and show what is also as a political understanding of that language. So I like to take, in the book I made a lot of research about entomology and insects and mosquitoes, and I like to translate that to science fiction, like use that is like a really technical language to estrange it and try to show what is in it, like what contains. And that's when the language starts to in English, how you can say, to get crazy. To get that technical language, but use it in a literary
way,
device, as a literary device, yes.
And in a way that's accessible. I think this does that, and then you translate the ideas of transfiction into ideas into science fiction in Spanish, and then translated into English.
Yes, there is a second translation as well. Yes.
There are two translations, yeah. So there are two. This is the second translation, if you look at it that way. But it's quite accessible. It's one of those books that once you start, it's one of those, okay, let me just do one more chapter, and before you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Right? Because dengue is not new to any of us. Right?
It's not what, sorry?
Dengue is not new to any of us. Dengue, chikungunya and all, we all have friends, family who've been infected by dengue. So when you say dengue boy, it doesn't horrify us as much as it would maybe anyone from the first world. Right? So we're quite at home with dengue. Yeah. So moving on. So you speak about extractive capitalism, and you've got your new book coming up called Technology and Barbarism, right? And I read through that as well. And I there's a scene in The Matrix, when Agent Smith is torturing Morpheus. You remember that? And he says that the humans, you've all seen The Matrix, right? Right. So in the scene where he's torturing Morpheus, so he says that the closest organism that he can compare humans to is the virus. Is the virus. Because the virus just takes over its host. In this case, if we are the virus, the planet is our host, right? Takes over the host till there's nothing left, right? And this was way back in the 90s in The Matrix. Just look for that scene. It's quite a hard-hitting scene. So there, Morpheus makes the case that humans are the virus. In technology and barbarism, you also make the case that the actual virus is perhaps capitalism. Right? Am I getting the reading of technology and barbarism, the first part, right? The fact that capitalism is in itself a virus that eats everything there is to be eaten.
Yes, and colonial capitalism.
Yeah, could you just expand on those themes?
Yes.
Because
Yes, totally.
it appears in here
Yes.
and it appears in...
Yes, what I wanted to show is like the book brings maps. There is because I was talking that South America gets flooded, and there is a map of how South America would look when with this new configuration of the world. And I wanted to take like Argentine literature and culture started with a reflection about the geography of the country. That we have the Pampas, that are these big plains, and the Patagonia, that is cold with mountains and big like lakes. And these are like really romanticized geographies in Argentina by literature and also by painters, also by tourism. But at the same time are the geographies that are more destroyed due to the economies that the country relies on, as fracking, subsurface mining, also monoculture. So I wanted to show this, yes, like antagonism of how these geographies are eulogized, but at the same time they are massively destroyed by the economy and by colonial capitalism. So the book tries to imagine and envision how these geographies that are really connected with like big extensions of land, if they will become like just water. And yes, the book is a reflection of that. And how this is like a violence that is going on through centuries, because
And it's not going to stop anytime soon.
it doesn't look like no. Because the book is also about like I think violence as a virus, in the sense that a virus is something that is not dead nor alive. It's something that just can get activated or deactivated. Like a virus can be millions of years under ice or in a meteorite, and it finds a host and inactivates again. It doesn't die. And for me, that violence operates in the same way. There are violence, like in the case of Argentina, started with colonialism in the 16th century, and they are still taking place now, like violence against geographies and local communities to extract resources and take all this richness to other countries where the headquarters of these corporations are located. So the novel takes place in this future where Pampas and Patagonias were radically transformed, but the novel is about childhood, like childhood in a future where childhood, yes, the novel is about in this future where there is no idea of future, what will happen with childhood, that it's all about the future in potentiality. So the kids are in this place, but they play a video game that takes place in the 19th century, when the configuration of the country took place.
I assure you want to give out too many spoilers.
So see, just to say that the novel takes place both in the
Future and the past.
24th century and the 19th century, but the violence that takes place is the same one. So I wanted to portray how this colonial and capitalist violence it doesn't have time in a sort of way, because it happens always in the same way.
I mean, this is exactly. I mean, it's the same what you said about Argentina. Same thing that applies to India as well, where colonialism sort of ravaged us for centuries and stuff like that. It's just that we replaced a bunch of outsiders exploiting us with a bunch of insiders exploiting us. Nothing much has really changed for those of those of people at, below the 1%. It's just that instead of the outsiders taking things outside, it's just people from here sending it outside. That's all. Anyway, that's just a side off. So, but like you said, this novel operates on multiple levels, and it takes a little bit of immersiveness to sort of keep track of it. But because, like I said, it's happening in 152 years from now, but at the same time, it's also happening about 100 years into the past, when the characters within in the book are playing. Okay, good to see someone having fun. Right? Are playing a game, and there are similarities there, like you said, and so we've spoken about the climate, we've spoken about capitalism and all that. Now I just want to just sort of step back a bit and talk about the role of speculative fiction or science fiction in sort of shaping a narrative or shaping popular discourse. The place that I'm coming from is, usually we think that science fiction is the literature of the future. Right? I mean, that's the usual understanding, right? That science fiction is always about the future. But what I believe is, the science fiction is a reflection of the times that we are in right now, that the author or the reader or you and me are in right now. I mean, for example, if you see post-World War II science fiction, right? Just post-World War II science fiction. It was all about big things. Everything was going to be good, spaceships and ray guns and, interplanetary this thing. Everything is good. Everything is great, because that reflected the zeitgeist or the times of the authors they were living in, post-World War II boom and the prosperity and all of those things, right? So while they were writing about the future, they were just reflecting the times that they were living in. So to see a lot of science fiction nowadays being very sort of dystopian, while it's set in the future, and we're talking about dystopian futures, and Dingy Boy is quite as dystopian as it gets. It's actually a reflection of the times that we live in, that you live in, and your experiences, right? So my question to you is, while we think it's a literature of the future, it's actually being written in the present, so it reflects the fears and concerns of the present, right? So what are those concerns that you sort of extrapolated into Dengi Boy from a science fictional lens?
Totally, yes. Now I was invited in a conference that was like about speculative fiction and speculation. Like now in Argentina we have a new president that transformed all the economy, like in financial economy, and I got to talk about the distinctions between speculative fiction and speculative finances, that they share the word of speculation, and speculative finances that are also entangled with these plans of Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, because nowadays they talk about terraforming Mars, but in the case that happened, it will be like in 300 years. But that as an idea already operates in the finances, as people speculate and buy and sell bonds, and SpaceX profits of this speculation. And this is a speculation in the near future. Like all the economy, it's about the speculation of the future in financial terms. Like what will be the price of the oil, the coal. But that makes like a concentration that's the only possible future, the future of finances, that is a near future that impacts the present. I like an idea of a Afrofuturist writer called Weshun, that he says the already exists, and it's the future that finances imagine and speculate, and it's also the future that mainstream sci-fi also imagine and makes us to think that there is not a other possible future. But what science fiction written from a different perspective as our countries, what can do is hack that future to show what are the crevices of those near future projects of capitalism. And I think in that sense, sci-fi has the potentiality of builds new futures, but those futures talk about our present. There is a novel of the 19th century by Edward Bellamy that is the first novel that was named as speculative fiction, and it's about a guy that go to sleep in 1887 and he wake up in the 22nd century. But when he wakes up like traveling into time, and he sees his time while he's going to the future. And I like that image. Like sci-fi allows you to imagine the future, but that is the possibility of see with a different perspective your present. And I think that's also a potentiality of sci-fi, to imagine a different future, but also to see the present from a different perspective.
True. Like William Gibson famously said, the future is already here, but it's unevenly distributed. It's already here, but it's just sort of unevenly distributed. If you're not in the future, you're probably in the wrong place.
Yes, also it's interesting now, maybe seeing the connections with India and South America, that when I presented this book in Spain, they told me, no, because sci-fi is about universal stories, about astronauts conquering Mars, but your writing is really provincial, they told me, because it talks about Argentina and South America. And I thought, maybe it's that because we are used to see the future from a US perspective, and if you think the future from a different culture, it looks like provincial. But that's only because the future is unevenly distributed.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
I agree with you.
So there is like a potentiality of our countries and cultures to depict the future, to distribute it better, that imagination.
Yeah, I mean, we get to decide how dystopian we want our future to be. Sorry.
No, totally. Yeah. And also about dystopia, because I hear a lot of people saying we live in really catastrophic times. So writing dystopia is like artificially adding more pessimistic views in a time that is already horrible. But I think that's like an incorrect understanding of dystopia. I like a quote of Ursula K. Le Guin that she says that in the heart of a dystopia beats an utopia. And I think that the utopia has a dialectic relation with utopia. Like a really interesting dystopia is a one that depicts a time and show the crevices where a possible utopia appears. So dystopia has that as in beating inside the possibility of utopia. So dystopia allows to think an utopia. It's not that it's only pessimistic.
True. I mean, even then, Ursula Le Guin did subtitle it an ambiguous utopia. An ambiguous utopia, because when we use the term dystopian, we must also ask dystopian for who? Dystopian for who? Right? Because if you ask me, is this dystopian or utopian? I will say that this is dystopian. Dengue Boy is dystopian. But for the 1%ers, now here's the thing. In the world of Dengue Boy, 99.9% of people don't know what cold is. They don't know what cold is. They've never felt that feeling. They don't know what cold is. But there's this cruise ship where you can pay, it's, triple trillionaires and their tourists and all, they get to go on a cruise liner which has actual ice. Right? And they live in absolute luxury. And it has a multi-billion worth, collection of the last remnants of the Earth's glaciers. It's all there in Dengue Boy. So they are living in a utopia. For them, it's a utopia. So when we say dystopia or utopia, we need to be very clear, like, who is it a dystopia for? Right? It's like when asked about Handmaid's Tale, Atwood said, I've not written anything in the book about Handmaid's Tale, anything in the book that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Right? So anyway, so to come back to Dengi Boy and what he was saying, one thing that's clear is that you're not that big a fan of Elon Musk. I take it.
No, not that much.
It's not that hard to guess, is it? So, okay, as of yesterday or today, I think, the Voyager 1 is officially about one light day away from India. From the world, sorry. Yeah, from Earth. So if you send a radio signal to it, it'll take one light day to reach the Voyager. It's the right. And what the one thing about the Voyager was it contained this record of human music and language and all this sort of thing. Now, Elon Musk wants to do the same thing with Falcon Heavy, or rather he wanted to. So where lots of literature, art and everything is put together in this chip, in this crystal and all that sort of thing, and it's kept in a lunar base so that be it aliens or future generations and all can see it and know about the culture of Earth as it stands and stuff like that. And so they reached out to a lot of people and artists across the world. So Elon Musk, via his team and all, reached out. And one of the people that they reached out to was Michel. Right? So the irony. Right? So Elon Musk for Falcon Heavy, for his contribution, reaching out to him. So do you want to tell them a little bit about that experience and what you wrote?
Yes, this is not narrated in this book, but in a new one.
It's not in the book, but just to give you an idea, because the themes are the same.
Yes.
The themes are the same. That's
yes,
why I said.
Yes, this is a new book that is coming out that is from a non-fiction perspective, the topics that are here. And I tell the story that like 2 years ago, like a institution reached out to me that they were not part of SpaceX. They were like a institution that was commissioned by SpaceX to gather art from all over the world, and this archive would be included in a SpaceX mission that would take all the text and the music to the moon. And at the same time, I was writing this book and this new text that is like a political critique of how technology is implemented by 1% of the world for their only benefit. So I sent a story that is like a satire of Elon Musk's plans to terraform Mars. Yes, that's what I tell. And I sent that and I never received a reply, so probably it got rejected. But
I think Elon Musk read the last line. I read the story. I mean, I read it in Technology and Barbarism. I read that. So if it ever comes up, please, what's the name of the story? Crypt something, right?
Crypto worms. Crypto worms.
Crypto vermin. No,
Yes.
Crypto worms. So if it ever comes out, look for it. So it'll make you an even bigger fan of Elon Musk. Hashtag sarcasm. So, okay. So, do you want to, is there anything else that you want to talk about the book that I perhaps haven't asked you about?
No, I don't know if we can talk something else. I also wanted to say that also science fiction written from different latitudes that is not the US or Europe allows to narrate a different experience of technology that is really important. Because what we were talking about this before, that in what happened in South America was that like the bookstores and for readers you had like sci-fi and Latin American literature, and the sci-fi magazines usually had like introductions that had these explanations that okay, so sci-fi US writers they have like a direct access to progress and to civilization, so they are more legitimated to write science fiction, while in South America, as we are importers of merchandise, we also import like the fiction about that merchandise and technology. But I think it's not that we don't have the direct experience of the progress or technology, but it's a different experience that comes from the history of our countries, and that's a political potentiality of writing science fiction from our cultures. And also, like in a time like everyday experience and existence is completely traversed by technology, but that technology already comes with epistemology. Like we consume AI, and that's a name for language models. We don't have a reflection what is called it AI, if it is intelligent or not, it's like already comes fenced. Like the technology comes fenced also with a sense, and what science fiction allows is to critically socialize the discussion about these technologies, and yes, have a different understanding of it, especially trying to think it from our cultures that are different that what is invented and manufactured only from the Silicon Valley understanding.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, science fiction, if it has, I mean, while science fiction has the ideas contained, have universality, everything it has to be rooted in that culture and all that. And every culture interacts in a different way with technology, right? And you mentioned that we were talking about the history of science fiction in our respective cultures. I mean, India has a long history of science fiction despite everything. I mean, when you're being colonized and you have signboards saying Indians and dogs not allowed and you're fighting for freedom, science fiction is little probably not something that you really want to indulge in, or neither the people. But despite that, I mean, India's had a long history of writing science fiction. I mean, the first feminist utopian sci-fi story happened in 1905.
Wow.
In 1905, as 120 years ago. And it was the first in the world, right? And then there was, for example, there was a...
What's the name of the book?
It's a short novel. It's called Ladyland. It's by this lady called Begum Rokeya Hossain. So it's a sort of dream narrative in which the protagonist goes to sleep and she dreams of utopia where all the men are behind doors because they're unproductive. Half the time they're drinking tea and smoking BDs and tobacco and wasting time. So the women run the world. There's a lot of technological things mentioned in there, and the world runs this thing because it's a sort of feminist utopia, right? I'll send it to you.
Yes, that would be great.
Later. Then, for example, there's this amazing guy called Shivaram Karanth. He was a Kannada artist. He wrote in 1928 a novel of First Contact, where there's a bunch of people who create a spaceship and travel to Mercury and make contact with the society there and all that, and in which he came up with the concept of something called the Tejo Bhashaka, which is a litophone, which involves interplanetary communication much before, decades before the Ansible was invented. So I'm sure Argentina also has that a history of science fiction stretching, or speculative fiction stretching back.
Yes, totally. Like starting from the 19th century, there is a rich tradition of text that wouldn't be named science fiction, because that's a term that was invented in the 1920s in the US. It was more like fantasciencia was the name, like scientific fantasies.
Yeah. We have our own terms too. In Kannada, for example, science fiction stories are called Vaidyanika Kathekalu, scientific stories, right? Or in Bengali they call it Kalpabhigyan, imaginary science and all of those things. While I mentioned it from the 20th century, we too have something going back from the 19th century. But if you talk about that, it'll be dinner time by the time I finish talking.
Yes, no, but that's important because that genealogy allowed to think like a history of technological experience and development also for the future. Like I like a Chinese philosopher that is called Yu Hui. Like he talks what he called cosmotechnics. That is like, we think like technology is universal, but if we see like the cultural history, it comes from a specific place. Like we have to think like the historic contingency of technology that will allow us to think different technologies. And in this moment where we're really traversed by technology, in a moment where climate change is happening, and the technology as it works is not, I don't know how to say it in English, but it doesn't have a future. Like if you see like AI, it depends more and more in coal, like in old fossil energies. And we think that these are really cutting-edge technologies, but they rely more and more in old type of energy that are destroying the planet. So we are in the urgency of thinking new technologies that are entangled with our own culture and history and how our countries are destroyed.
True,
And he has this idea of techno-diversity. You can think about cultural diversity, like techno-diversity is like a political urgency of our time, and science fiction allows to open an horizon for that.
Yeah, science fiction allows you to open an horizon, but like someone said, I wish the tech bros would look at cyberpunk and dystopian novels as cautionary tales, not as instruction manuals. Right? Okay, so we've got about, I think, 8 minutes left in this session. What I would like to do is, instead of me going on and on, we'd like to hear your voice too, in case any of you have any questions or anything you want to ask Michel. Questions, not, this is less of a question but more of a comment type thingies. But the question. Yeah, the lady there.
Hi, so this is not a question but more of a comment.
More of a comment. Yes, I preempted you. I knew that was coming.
Okay, so I have been reading your work and I wanted to finish it before the session but I couldn't, unfortunately. But I'm still reading and I completely I love it. And I like a lot of things, how you weave together your topics of, you discuss climate change, you bring in elements from your culture, historical aspects, the rich-poor divide. And I love all that and how you weave it to, along with technology, sci-fi elements. There's a whole world building there. I loved, how the transition from Dengue Boy to...
Let me stop you there. Let me stop. I could have said that too, but I didn't, for a reason.
Okay, cool. I didn't say it. Yeah, the transition. I think you both got it. At least, yeah, that was a twist. That was a really cool twist that I wasn't expecting. So yeah, I don't have much to say, just that I really liked it, and also how you brought about video game narration in between. Yeah, through the video game you talk about, the Indian, and that was really interesting, something I've not seen before. Yeah. Love it. And just a small question, I don't know if it's a question, but we have for example, we have authors like Nediographer. There are authors who are writing from, the non US, from countries with a history of colonization. So Sographer uses the term African fusionism to define her work. So would you call your work Argentinian futurist, or is there any term that you would use to define your work? Just a question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the comment and the feedback. I really appreciate it. Yes, just like a funny name, because there was a moment that there was an inflation of cyberpunk subgenres like steampunk, nanopunk, stonepunk.
There's hope punk, steampunk, diesel punk, elf punk.
They're infinite, yes. So I invented one that is gaucho punk. That is because in Argentina there is this traditional figure, like a rural worker, that's the gauchos. So I call it gaucho punk. It's like a cyberpunk from a South American perspective.
Yes.
Thank you.
Somebody should write sort of musical this thing about it. I mean, I have dibs on Daft Punk. Okay. Do you have the copy of a book with you? Digital copy. The problem with digital copies is that you can't get it signed by the author. Okay. So, score, I don't know how much more for physical copies. 0 digital. Right. Anyone has any other questions? Yeah, the gentleman in the back. It's like when Ian MacDonald was asked, how do you describe River of Gods? It's an amazing book set in India of 2047. It's called River of Gods. He laughingly said, I'll call it, I don't know, Khyber Punk. After the Khyber Punk. Khyber Punk. Take one more punk. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. That was a lovely conversation for the author and the interlocutor. So my question is, I wanted to ask you if you have any more thoughts on, in all kinds of utopia, for instance, it has an element of a libertarian exit, right? The one that we see at the moment with Musk and so on and so forth. But it's been the case since the start. If you think of Thomas More's utopia, it's the same. I mean, you have scarcity of land, population explosion, you have to go elsewhere, right? And I believe kind of an original sin of science fiction is also that it's imbricated with colonial powers, right? French and the English would have science fiction at a time when they are expanding their empires, right? So what is it that when we, the formerly colonized people, write our version, which is neither a libertarian exit nor a retrenchment of colonial ideology or something. Where does science fiction, as you experience, as you explore, where does that lie between these two poles?
Thank you for the question. It's a really interesting question. Yes, because if you read the sci-fi, like European sci-fi from the 19th century, it's like they're distorting the history of colonialism, but in different planets. Like they discover a new civilization, they conquer it, and we talk about space colonization, space colonies, that takes the language from the history of colonization, and nowadays it's just the same. Like you see Jeff Bezos with a cowboy hat and a cowboy belt, and he's like taking the iconography of the cowboys that conquer the east of the United States, killing all the indigenous populations. And yes, that's a challenge, I think, for writing science fiction, but I think that the potentiality of writing from our stories is telling our histories and our experience with technology, and I think that's decolonizing the genre, and also decolonizing the idea of the future, that only the future can be for colonizers and can be also for people that were colonized. And I think that's what allows writing science fiction from a different cultural but also geography. Because all these exit plans, you see like Mars is like a duplication of the small towns of the US, and it's like the US geography and culture continues, but it's like the rest of the world disappears. So imagining the future from our culture is imagining that also our cultures can continue in the future. And I think that that's decolonizing the genre and the idea of the future.
True,
I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I think it.
Each of us has a future, and our authors are writing it. It's just a question of looking for it. I feel looking for it and reading it, because there's a lot being written. I don't know what Argentina, I mean, this thing is a little limited with Argentina, but India, I can say that there are stories being written. It's just a matter of looking for them and reading them and telling two more people, say, hey, here's something interesting, why don't you read it, right? Because it's like the Ouroboros, right? If you read and you tell your friends and they buy the book, you'll get more books that approach our futures from an Indian perspective or from an Argentinian perspective, and more will lead, and you know, that's how the cycle perpetuates, right?
Yes, and I think we are in the urgency of thinking different decolonized futures. There's this famous quote by Mark Fisher that is easier to think the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And now it's like capitalism is thinking how it will continue when the world disappears, and it's like it's the only possible future, like that is feasible. So we need to think other futures that make unfeasible that project.
True. I mean, since you mentioned Le Guin earlier, she also said, you know, the end of capitalism is unthinkable, but at one point, so was the divine right of kings, right? So it's possible. You can write your own future. Any other questions? I think we have time for one more. Someone? Yeah, sure, please.
Hi, my name is Anna. As you said that, you know, science is a very culture-specific concept. And in Indian science fiction specifically, what we understand as science also includes a lot of indigenous knowledge, which, you know, the Western Enlightenment science would, you know, rather disregard. So what I want to ask is whether Latin American science fiction also has a different understanding of science that comes through in speculative fiction writing or science fiction writing. Of course, you've mentioned that, you know, you see science and technology as something that is imported into or imposed upon Argentinian and Latin American people. But is there a response, a post-colonial or a decolonial response to science as well, which comes from within the culture?
Thank you for your question. Yes, that's really interesting. It happened a lot, like indigenous medicine that was banned, like knowledge about plants that were exterminated, and also that was like stolen by big pharma. And there is now a movement in science fiction that is called techno-shamanism, that is to take in those imaginaries of yes, techno-shamanism, yes, like thinking this specific knowledge about plants and medicine and a non-Western medicine that was banned, and how a future with those knowledge would be. And you have a lot of great authors. I'm not sure if they have been translated to English, but
Don't think so. See,
Baradit, one is one Chilean author, Luis Carlos Barragan.
yeah, see, in that sense, India is a microcosm of the world, right? There's so many good science fiction stories in Marathi, in Tamil, right, in Assamese, which, being an Indian, I cannot read, because I can read Hindi, I can read English, I can read Kannada. It's not available in any of these three languages. So when we talk about indigenous cultures and all this sort of thing, those same cultures, the languages in themselves sort of become a barrier, right? I know it's there, but I can't read it. So that's unfortunate.
We need more translators.
Huh?
We need more translators.
We need more translators. We
But I
definitely
would
need more
recommend this
translators.
book by Yuk Hui that is called Art and Cosmotechnics. That is a Chinese author, but he thinks about that, like thinking technology and science from a non-Western perspective. That for me was really influential to think about these topics.
Yeah. And fascinatingly enough and fittingly, the translator of Thingiboy into English is an Indian origin guy called Rahul Perry. Right? Yeah. Anyway, so that brings us to the end of Future Fever. Thank you, Michel, for coming down and
Thank you,
sharing
Shenoy.
your
Thank
ideas
you,
with
everyone.
us. Those who haven't read Thingiboy, I'm sure will go and look for a copy. Make sure it's a physical copy so you can get it signed during the event and all that. Thank you all for being such a great and engaged audience and being a knowledgeable audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm
Thank you.
grateful and
Right?
happy to
As
be
I say,
here.
live long and prosper.